Hey guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing Comic Uno's Best Comics of the Week, and this week I had much less books than last week, and it is 13 titles. So this is the show where I go least favorite to best pick of the week, and my least favorite this week was Legion of Superheroes Millennium issue 1. This is a two-parter comic, and then we get into the actual Legion of Superheroes comic, which I'm guessing Bendis is writing. I actually don't know who's writing that book, but I will say I'm not a huge Legion of Superhero fan. I think for many DC fans, unless you're a hardcore fan of the title, it's actually really hard to get into the team. There's a lot of members, and in recent years, there hasn't really been a humongous jumping on point for the team. So I was actually looking forward to this because Bendis usually is good at jumping on points because he has started so many franchises over again. Obviously with Ultimate Spider-Man, then you have X-Men and Avengers and now Superman. So I was curious to see what he would do with this team. A team, again, I have no real connection to. There's not really even a character that I could say, oh, I really like them from somewhere else because they're so connected. Maybe Supergirl, because she somewhat was in the Legion of Superheroes. But yeah, this has nothing to do with them, so don't worry. So that was disappointing. And what it actually is about is Rose and Thorn, who we have been seeing in Bendis' other titles, and I honestly haven't been really liking her that much. I feel like I don't really know why she's being shoved into these stories, and I still don't really know why she has such a big spotlight. Just because maybe Bendis wants to create a character that, you know, is not that big in the DC universe and make her bigger, but I feel like it's kind of forced, and this issue kind of does the same thing. And the only part I really liked about this issue was the opener with the Jim Lee artwork, which I thought was great, and it was nice to see his artwork again. And I got into her soul. I was like, okay, I get it. It was interesting to see a little bit more about her character, but then as it went on, I'm like, oh, so the whole issue is going to be about her. Where the hell are the Legion of Superheroes? And they just don't show up. The most that we get from the future is that we get a future version of Supergirl, and again, she's had connections with the Legion of Superheroes, and we get to see Batman Beyond. That is like the biggest connection, I would say, to the future. And then again, as we go on into the story, I just kind of got less and less interested. I thought the artwork got weaker as we went along and just wasn't my favorite issue. I don't even know if I want to pick up issue 2. I might just jump on to Legion of Superheroes issue 1 to see what that's about, because this is just not about them. And I really feel bad for the hardcore fans and even people like me who wanted to jump into this just because they wanted to learn more about the team. So I'm going to give this 2.5 stars, and that is number 13. Moving on to number 12, which is the other big book this week, and that is House of X issue 4, which actually is a bit higher than the other issues. I enjoyed this a little bit more than previous ones, and I know I'm in the minority of disliking this book, even though I really enjoyed that issue too, as I keep mentioning. I wish every issue was like that. And with this issue, you definitely get a lot of tension, and you get some death as well. Is Cyclops actually dead or not with this issue? But one thing I don't like is just the way it's presented. I'm just not a big fan of the dialogue, and it just feels like a lot of things are being thrown at you, and I kind of wish we spent more time with the characters and spent more time in this world before we're thrown into this craziness, really. But I do like how it calls back to a lot of X-Men mythos that we have seen in the past, and with this, it's no more mutants in a way. Except now it's like, no more of this shit. I want to have power. I'm tired of us dying. So I enjoyed the repurposing of those, big words for Marvel, or famous words for Marvel. And the artwork is always really solid for this book, but again, just not quite there for me. I like pieces of the book, but just not really the execution of it. And it's just not for me. Not saying it's a bad book by any means. I definitely understand why a lot of people enjoy it. It's just not my style. So House of X issue 4, I'm going to give 2.5 stars, and that is number 12. Moving on to number 11, which is The Amazing Spider-Man Going Big, issue 1. As a huge Spider-Man fan, of course, I was going to pick this up, but I don't think it's really necessary. None of the stories really popped out at me. I would say the first one, I guess, the most it did, because we get to see a character we haven't seen in a while, which is Christy Watson, which is MJ's cousin. So it's cool to see her, and I do like Gerry Conway's voice in general, but by the end of the story, I'm like, did we really need this? It's like, it's cool to see her, but I didn't really get much besides that she's in college. And then everything else. Also, like, one thing I don't really understand about this book, because I'm in the nostalgia frame, so I'm like, what time period is all this in? Is this when MJ and Peter are together? Because the way they talk, even Christy in the end is just like, oh, like, that sucks that she had to talk to Peter. So is it before they got back together? So timeline, I didn't really quite understand. The middle story kind of felt like a throwaway about bullies, and it's like a 3-page story. And then the last story, it's nice nostalgia, but honestly felt very stilted, and that's the Erik Larson storyline. And I don't even think his artwork was as good as it usually is. It felt a bit blocky and honestly a bit rushed as well. So I'm going to give this 2.5 stars. I was a bit disappointed, and if you're trying to save money, I don't think this is the most necessary Spider-Man one-shot unless you're a hardcore fan of the character. I would probably still pick it up again, but if you want to save your money, I think it's $4.99. Yeah, it's a $4.99 book. So number 10 for me is Chammpions, issue 9. I also felt like this is a bit of an improvement of the book. This is the penultimate issue, so we're coming to the end, and I like the way the Chammpions are going up against each other and whatever is controlling them. We get to see that with Nova and Riri, and we really get to see their insecurities and I guess the insecurities of the team as well, so I thought that was cool. I'm really excited to see where this Viv and Riri story is going to go on. What's going to happen with their relationship. Does Riri potentially have feelings for Viv and she's just kind of shoving it inside? I'm really curious about that, and I hope we get the answers with the next issue, or maybe even Ironheart. And I feel like that's a cliffhanger that just hasn't really been touched upon. And then the Nova stuff I thought was fun, but the artwork I think could be a little bit stronger. So, especially the coloring. I feel like the coloring is pretty damp. I think the pencils are pretty good, but yeah, the coloring, it kind of gets me out of it. But overall, it's an okay penultimate issue. I kind of wish this was the story from the beginning of the series and then building up from there, because I just want more from the team. But it was nice that we did get to see a little bit more from the core team, or at least potential from the core team. So overall, I'm going to give Chammpions issue 9 3 stars. Moving on to number 9, and that is another huge book from this week, and that is Doomsday Clock issue 11. I was pretty torn with this book, and I'm going to do a topic video probably tomorrow for this, and that is the hype worth it for Doomsday Clock? I think a lot of DC fans, a lot of comic fans are putting a lot of their well, first of all, yes, money, but I think a lot of their hope into this series that's going to change everything for DC. And after this, we're going to get so many more titles and so many great storylines, and it's all been stalling because of Doomsday Clock. And how about if that's not true? And I feel like that's the dwindling fear I have with this issue, because there's not a lot that happens. I think if you're a hardcore DC fan, you will get some nods, which is interesting, get small answers. Like, alright, who's in that cell? Alright, that was kind of obvious. Cool, that's the person in the cell. You get some conversation with Saturn Girl. We also know, what I do like is that we get to see the Watchmen world kind of collide with DC, and Jeff Johns writing a love letter to Watchmen, where he compares the DC superheroes through the lens of Watchmen, which I really enjoyed for this issue. I think Ozymandias is still a really good villain, and even though it's very exposition-y, I feel like that is very much his character. He's always in the shadows, and then he reveals the big plan. He's like, this is what I've been doing the whole time. He is the puppet master in a lot of ways, so that's something I enjoyed about this issue, but you don't get a lot. You just don't get a lot in this issue, especially in the beginning. You get some Lex Luthor stuff. I just wanted more for this, again, epic event, penultimate issue, the delays we've had. You just want more from this issue. And by the end, it's Dr. Manhattan vs. Superman. Cool, I guess. And one thing I didn't like about this issue, or one of the many things I didn't like about this issue, is that they focus so much on the aftermath of everyone hating Superman that I feel like you just didn't get enough of everything else. And I think that was the big stall of this issue. Even though I definitely understood the political undertones of that, and again, connects to what Watchmen was trying to do, it didn't work here as much. It didn't work as well as Watchmen did it, because the way Watchmen weaved it through, it wasn't so obvious, and it just weaved through the story a little bit better. So Doomsday Clock issue 11 gets 3.5 stars. Artwork is gorgeous. As a Watchmen fan, there's some really good stuff here, but as a DC fan, I am a little worried for this last issue. So Doomsday Clock issue 11 gets 3.5 stars, and that is number 9, I believe. Yes, we are moving on to number 8, and I'm going to get a sip of water. So let's do that. All right, number 8 for me is Future Foundation, issue 2. A little disappointed to see this not in my top 5, because as you guys know, I'm a huge Julie Power fan, huge Power Pack fan, and this issue once again felt a little crowded to me, and that's definitely been its biggest downfall. Also really exposition-y. You have like the first 4 or 5 pages just explaining how this version of Reed is different from the other Reed, which was cool for, I would say, the first page, and you're like, okay, I know these characters, I want to get into the story. And then we get to the Julie and Ricky stuff, which I enjoyed the most. I had a lot of fun with their chemistry, and yeah, I enjoyed the way they utilized their powers. But then once we actually went to the Future Foundation stuff and the Reed stuff, once again, it was really exposition-y, very explain-y, and I was like kind of had a question mark of why the Future Foundation took so long to figure out this was not their Reed, because they don't look anything alike. So that was also weird by the end of the issue, or maybe I misread something, but in the end they were like, oh wait, it's a different Reed. So I'm guessing they didn't know it was not their Reed for this whole time, or they had to really prove the point there, but that definitely slowed the issue down a bit, and the artwork is okay for me. It's a bit cartoony, but overall I think the book does have a lot of potential with a kind of shaky first story arc, and I hope that's true, because again, I do love these characters a lot, and I think especially the Power Pack members, they really shine through a lot, which as a Power Pack fan, I really enjoy, and I hope the rest of it could kind of come together and solidify. So Future Foundation issue 2 gets 3.5 stars, and that is number 8. Moving on to number 7, which is Deathstroke, issue 47, and I've honestly been really surprised by this book. It's one of those books that are very up and down. There's times where I'm like, I'm just gonna drop this book, I'm done. It's been the same creative team for almost 50 issues, and then they do something really different, and I'm like, oh, I'm right back at it. And that's exactly what this arc is where Deathstroke is dead, he's alive now, there's 2 Deathstrokes, but what I really like is that the issue takes a focus on our 3 main characters, which is Slade, Jericho, and Rose, and them all dealing with their own issues. We get to see Rose not liking that she's becoming the good guy. She doesn't like that Jericho kind of took that edge away from her, and she's still dealing with her daddy issues, and that also goes for Red Arrow as they fight each other. Jericho dealing with the more DC villain year plot, where he has this ultimate power, and he doesn't really know what to do with it. And then Slade, again, there's 2 Slades, he's alive, there's a lot of explanations there, and it was a pretty solid issue. I enjoyed it, artwork was really good. Confusing cliffhanger, but I'm gonna go with it, and it was a fun issue, so I'm gonna give that 3.5 stars, and that is number 7. Moving on to number 6, which is the Immortal Hulk, issue 23, and one of my favorite covers, man. Love this cover. Betty turning into her Red She-Hulk version, if she's called Red She-Hulk anymore. But overall, this is a really fun issue. I think it really could have been just an action-packed issue, but it became more than that with the reporter's dialogue and her monologue, where she discusses her connection with the Hulk and her fears about the Hulk, and really the situations that she's going in, and how she ended up in this situation. So I really enjoyed that, and her kind of psychoanalysis of everything was really cool. The thing that brought it to not top 5 level is that story-wise, not much happens here, and also, I don't really care for Alpha Flight. I don't think they needed to be here, and they took up a lot of real estate in this issue, but overall, the artwork is so good, and if you're looking for an action-packed issue with a little bit more oomph because of some good narration, I think the Immortal Hulk issue 23 was a really solid issue. So I'm going to give that 4 stars, and that is number 6. Moving on to number 5, which my store didn't have, but hopefully next week they will, and that is Crowded, issue 9, so I read that one digitally, and I love this book. It's definitely one of my favorite Image books right now, especially that Paper Girls is over. It is one of the books I look forward to every month when it does come out, and the chemistry between Vita and Charlie is just so electrifying, and this issue proves that. You know, it's pretty much the same thing of like, okay, they gotta run away from some certain situation. We find that Charlie is an asshole and has had a bad life in the past and hasn't treated people well, and Vita has to deal with that. And it just works so well, but the ending is that, you know, after some pulse-pounding chasing and running away, we get to see Vita and Charlie hook up. So that emotional tension, that romantic tension finally is let out by the end of the issue. And really curious to see, you know, where this relationship is going to go and the complications of their relationship now that there is a romantic connection. So really fun, solid issue, and totally recommend this book. I can't believe it's only up to issue 9. I feel like in a normal book, this would be like issue 30, and this is how much progress we would have. But there's been so much progress in just 9 issues. Alright, moving on to number 4. And that was 4 stars if I didn't mention that. Number 4 for me is Buffy the Vampire Slayer, issue 8. Who I actually don't know who's on this cover, because it looks like a lot of characters. It looks like Anya, it might be Joyce. I don't know. It could be Buffy. I have no clue who's on this cover, because it literally looks like 3 characters. But I did like the cover. I thought it was really well drawn. But anyways, going into the story, artwork, I'm still not a fan of it. I think, you know, their eyes are really buggy, and it's hard to get used to, especially because you started out with Dan Mora. Everyone just, like, looks really excited about things. So, not a big fan of the artwork. But the story, man, this felt like an episode of Buffy for modern times. It really, probably, out of any of the issues, totally felt like I was watching it on TV. Because we get to see Giles go to this shindig with Calendar and meets up with Joyce and her boyfriend, and then, of course, we get to see Drusilla come in and be like, hey, I need this knife, and we get to see the vampire and the Hellmouth really attack Sunnydale, as always, and Joyce is like, what's going on? I don't know what to do. So that was a lot of fun, and a really good lead up to the crossover that's coming up. And then, honestly, the stuff I enjoyed least was the Buffy stuff, which is weird. You would think the adults is like, why do we have that? That was really cool to see. Buffy's just kind of lurking around saying, I don't want to be at this party, and the stuff I did enjoy was the masked stranger coming up to her and talking to her. And, of course, it's Angel. You know it's Angel. And I really enjoyed that conversation. And then I kind of wish there was more build-up to Dark Willow in the end of the issue. I'm like, oh, okay, where did that come from? But all the stuff that did happen, even if there could have been better lead-up, was really awesome. Because, again, like, I felt like this was an episode, probably even a penultimate episode of Buffy. So, really excited to see where the crossover will go. And I'll give that 4 stars. And that is number 4. Moving on to number 3. Which is Fantastic Four, issue 14. This has been in my top 5 a lot, because it's a really good series. And if you're not reading Fantastic Four, you totally should. And this is a really fun, nostalgic issue, where we get to see the Fantastic Four do their journey again, or set up to do their journey of when they got their powers. Because it's the one mission they failed, and they're like, okay, I guess for nostalgic reasons, let's prove that we could do this. And Ben out of everybody's like, nah, I'm good. Like, we did this, we failed, and are we dumb? Like, why would we do it again? And I just love the interactions between everybody. I love Alicia and Ben. I love the kids being like, you know, being kids. They're like, well, we have ships that could go anywhere. Why would we do this? Bye, guys. So I enjoyed that aspect. And I think every character had a moment to shine and show how much they've grown. I would say maybe Reed and Sue had the least, or honestly, Sue probably had the least in this issue. But Johnny especially and Ben had a lot of good moments. There's a lot of funny moments, especially with Alicia. So I thought it was a really solid issue. I will say I think the decision behind going to space and doing this mission could have been a little bit stronger. It just felt like, yeah, why are they doing this? You kind of were in Ben's shoes. Like, this is the thing that didn't ruin your life, but really changed your life. But I also like that Reed really appreciated something that was flawed and the nostalgia of that. And I guess trying to improve it, so we'll have to see where that goes. But artwork was really solid as well, a lot of good expression, and overall it's a really fun story that celebrates the Fantastic Four's mission and their origins in general, and I'm really excited to see the modern twist they take for the next issue once they actually do the mission. So Fantastic Four issue 14 gets 4 stars, and that is number 3. So moving on to number 2. Number 2 for me is Harley Quinn in Poison Ivy issue 1. I believe this is the cover C. I got the Poison Ivy cover. Thought both were really cool, but only was gonna get one, and especially because it's a $4.99 book. But or at least the cover is for the villain year. I guess that's what the cover is. But I was pleasantly surprised by this book. I was looking forward to it because I'm like, oh, cool. Harley and Poison Ivy are finally getting some spotlight, because I feel like with a lot of their books, their relationship is really pushed to the side and at some points feels hidden, and I don't love that at all. I think a lot of times you're like, well, are they dating? Like, what's going on? Like, we don't really get to see a lot from them, and here we really get to see their romance and how Heroes at Crisis affected their relationship. And I thought it did it beautifully. As someone who didn't really quite like Heroes at Crisis, it's nice that we're getting a lot of consequences from it, and positive consequences in a way, or at least a positive journey from it. And Poison Ivy's literally turning into leaves, and Harley's trying to put it all together. And she stoops so low that they move to the suburbs, crazy for these Gotham City sirens. And then we get to see Harley want to become a superhero. So we'll see how that goes. But it's interesting, especially for characters that have definitely walked that line and finally making the decision of, all right, we're going to finally be heroes, even if we're not really designed to be that. And I liked how the other portions of the DC Universe kind of creeped in as well. We get some Lex Luthor stuff. We get some stuff from the Green. I thought it was a really well-balanced first issue with a lot of good emotion between Harley and Poison Ivy, and a beautiful insight of their relationship that I don't think enough comics with Poison Ivy and Harley have done in the past. So I'm really glad that they put this magnifying glass onto these two characters. And the artwork is super solid, especially with the emotional storytelling, the comedic storytelling. I thought it really was great. And really solid issue. Definitely going to pick up more, and hopefully it continues on this ride. So definitely recommend this one. And that is 4 stars, and that is number 2. Moving on to number 1, which is Ghost Spider Annual Issue 1. Honestly, I wasn't expecting much from this. I was expecting, okay, it's going to be a fun annual, but it was a really good emotional story because we get to see Gwen go through Murder World, but there's a twist. It's not her Murder World. It's Peter's. So, obviously we have a storyline where she's going to the 616 and trying to find her own identity. So I thought it was really interesting for Gwen to go through Peter's life and see the similarities or even the differences. So the first similarity is the Lizard. The Lizard's a completely different person to Gwen than Peter, but both have trauma connected to it. And then we have the Punisher, Daredevil, who are not friends, but totally supervillains in Gwen's world. And then the most beautiful of them all is seeing Gwen Stacy of the 616 not as a victim, where that is exactly what's played out. She's literally a robot that keeps saying, help me, and Gwen's obviously sees a lot in herself, that's not me, and that shouldn't be this Gwen. And, I think a lot of Spider-Gwen and why she's so popular is that it took away the woman in refrigerator moment for Gwen, where Gwen really was just the victim. She didn't have quite a story. She just fell to her death, and that's it. Honestly, we didn't have a chance to learn who Gwen is. I think a lot of writers have tried to define her, but with Spider-Gwen, she became a hero. We actually got her story. And so that's why it's this perfect moment in culmination by the end of this issue where it's I'm not that person, but I understand this person, and she shouldn't be a victim. And I love those pages. And also, Gwen just learning more about herself, of opening up and trying to connect with people as well because of it. So I thought it was a really, really good issue. Again, pleasantly surprised by this one. Artwork was really good too. Different from what we've gotten with, obviously, the first Spider-Gwen and the current Spider-Gwen, but I thought it was really sleek. And also the coloring, I felt did a good job at matching what's been going on with the coloring with the current book, but also the brightness of the coloring that we had with Rico Renze from the original Spider-Gwen book. So I really enjoyed the art. It again, was really sleek and some good action. There's even a Black Widow moment in this issue where she utilizes that technique, so that was cool. And overall, just a really fun issue. So I'm going to give that 4.5 stars. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno. Definitely tell me in the comments below what were your favorite comics, your least favorite comics, and everything in between. Go check out my comics like Father Like Daughter and They Call Her the Dancer. Go check out my social media on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram if you want to check that out. And every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time is Frontline Live, where we discuss our favorite comics and comic book news. So be sure to check that out as well. Thanks, guys. Bye.